Ah, the original Dragon Quest. It is a landmark game, and for me, it's a very personal one. I will never forget when I got this game, and it became a young Jaimas' hyperfixation. Young Jaimas fell in love with this game, its setting, and its overall premise. This is the game that got me into things like Dungeons & Dragons and fantasy literature, and I think it deserves a bit of recognition because it still holds up pretty well today. The overall gameplay loop, for the most part, is timeless, and while there's been a bunch of different versions of the game released over the years, you can still readily get most of them online. So we're going to talk about them today. The difference between the different versions, where to get them, and also what to expect from each of them. Because not all of them are created equal. I will also not be including the Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD version in this comparison, because it's fundamentally a different game. A great game, definitely worth playing, but the gameplay loop is completely different, and the progression is also much different. So with all that said, let us begin. The Famicom and NES originals have a couple of features that are kind of unique to them. Your character sprite will only have a shield or weapon equipped if you actually have one equipped. Believe it or not, this is unique to this version. All the other versions do not have this. The original version is quite playable, and it is a bit slower paced than the other ones. Enemy stats scale a little bit on the lower side in this particular entry. The downside is that due to the way that the game crunches data, your XP and gold gains are significantly lower than in the other games. This means that the actual grind late game tends to be a little bit slower than it would otherwise be. The game's controls are also a little bit sluggish, but it doesn't really matter because it's not a game where you need to be that precise. It's a bit hard to explain without actually playing it yourself, but anyone who's played Dragon Quest knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say that the controls are a little bit sluggish feeling. While the game itself is long since out of production, reproduction cartridges are actually pretty damn common, and you can still find the original pretty easily if you go looking for it. I've been trying to badger Nintendo to put it on Nintendo Switch Online, but so far unsuccessfully. The MSX version is the only version of Dragon Quest I do not recommend. It runs like trash. It is a brutally simplified version of the Famicom original. The screen tearing is virtually omnipresent when you're moving. The music is worse, there is no character facing. That it is a version of Dragon Quest that works on an MSX is its only actual upside. The MSX has no stateside penetration, and finding anything on it is almost impossible these days, so the only way you're going to be able to do this one is by emulating it. In 1993, Enix released Dragon Quest 1 and 2 as a Super Famicom game. It never officially made it to the West, but even as early as 1995, I remember running into reproduction cartridges of this one in the wild that had a translated version of the ROM. This is, in many ways, a feature-improved version of the original game. Experience and gold gains are now significantly better. There's now a bank where you can store money and items. You can now have equipment without actually equipping it, so you can take off or put on whenever you want. In the original Famicom release, getting a new piece of equipment would get rid of the old one, and if you bought a new one at a shop, they'd buy the old one for half price. There is a lot more treasure hidden around if you go looking for it. This allows you to get equipment much earlier, including finding equipment in the Rocky Mountain Cave in one case. The soundtrack has been reorchestrated and significantly improved, with many of the existing tracks being given an intermezzo segment. In the original Famicom release for the dungeons, the deeper that you went into them, the game would respond by pitching down and slowing down the soundtrack. This would gradually make them significantly more threatening. New hardware means new possibilities, so in the Super Famicom version, the deeper you go in, the orchestration changes. All future versions of Dragon Quest are based on the SNES version. Reproduction copies of this game are actually extremely common, so it's not that hard to get online if you really want one. The Game Boy Color version of Dragon Quest 1 and 2 is kind of revolutionary. It was released as a Game Boy Color title, but it was backwards compatible with the regular Game Boy. It's essentially a port of the SNES version, but it doesn't really suffer for being this. It looks and sounds great. Every feature that was brought in during the SNES version is present. The only real downside it has is a hard 4-character limit for character names. The game was never particularly common and was kind of hard to find, even though it was a Western release, but it's not hard to find reproduction copies of it pretty much wherever you look. The mobile port of Dragon Quest includes both the actual mobile ports on both iOS and Android, and versions of it which were also released on the likes of Nintendo Switch. It is, by far, the easiest version of Dragon Quest to get a hold of in this current age. And it is dirt cheap. $3, which is a hell of an entry price for this. It's also the only version of the game that actually includes the updated translation. Sadly, as a package, it's kinda mixed. The graphics look very muddy and redrawn, and the reason why is that it is a port of a port. It's essentially a reproduction of an earlier form of Dragon Quest that was originally released on mobile phones of the early 2000s. These had smaller screens, so when you scale them up, well, it doesn't look very good. So, yeah, the reason they look so bad is bad scaling. Their music's even better, as they use cuts from the Dragon Quest Symphonic Suite, but they also don't use it competently. For example, when you enter the caves in the mobile port, instead of just playing the actual song that's supposed to play at the actual floor, they just play the entire cave theme, which is a medley of every floor. It's lazy. Is the mobile port bad? No, it's good. Is it as good as the Game Boy Color or SNES versions? No. But it is the easiest to get and most accessible version of the original Dragon Quest, and that's something at least. If you're interested, find the version of Dragon Quest that works for you, and play it. It is absolutely worth your time, and I will be running a series of videos, hopefully in the next week or so, that are more or less going to help you have an easier time with it.